All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we're going to be talking about the Miami Dolphins, and I am joined by Fish Tank Podcast, one of the guys right now, Seth Levit, Executive Director for the Jason Taylor Foundation, and he worked for the Dolphins in the front office from 1996 to early 2000s.
Yep.
Welcome to the show. Thanks again.
I appreciate you having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, any day that I can talk about football is a good day.
Right.
And there's a lot to talk about with the Dolphins. I don't want to get into any of the controversial stuff, anything like that, but
Appreciate it.
it is, yes. But first of all, talk about how you have been associated with the Dolphins and you kind of obviously working with them for a number of years.
Yeah, I've been around this organization for a long time. I mean, I grew up a Dolphins fan. I'll be fully transparent there. Grew up in South Florida and huge Dolphins fan. And really my goal in life was to work for the team, and certainly wasn't going to be throwing touchdowns or calling plays on the sideline. So I had to find another way. But I was in the PR department. So I was, it was called the Media Relations Department at the time I was there. Now they call it Football Communications. I worked with under a legend by the name of Harvey Green. And alongside a guy by the name of Neil Golkus, both fabulous PR men who I learned a lot from. But I was there from 96, was my internship year. It was Jimmy Johnson's first year. And I was there through the 2003 season, left prior to the 04 season, probably about 5 weeks before Ricky Williams left as well. We left for different reasons, although that's kind of a running joke on our show that I'm getting blamed now for convincing Ricky to leave. But, that's another conversation for another day. But yeah, so I 8 seasons with the team and left to go work with Jason Taylor and start a nonprofit organization. He had a vision of work he wanted to do in the community, a legacy he wanted to leave. And that was 18 years ago, and we're still going strong.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, what you do with the Jason Taylor Foundation.
Sure. Well, I'm the executive director, have been since day one. And a lot of the things that were in this 3-page, I'll call it a business plan, but it certainly wouldn't pass any tests in any business schools around the country. But JT said, hey, put together a business plan of what you think this can look like. I threw some ideas together, things that I thought would be innovative, things that I thought would align with who he is and what his goals were. And a lot of those things we still do today. But the bottom line is we focus on young people in South Florida. So if you're familiar with South Florida, the tri-county area, as they say, is Miami-Dade, Broward County, and then Palm Beach County. And that's our primary focus. We do a lot of work in the education and empowerment space. We'll touch upon healthcare. We have a huge partnership with the Holtz Children's Hospital. They have the Jason Taylor Children's Learning Center there. But education, empowerment, scholarships, mentorship. We have a huge poetry program, believe it or not, the largest spoken word poetry program in the state, and actually just introduced a new careers in sports program, which maybe we'll have some future podcasters come out of that one.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, when you look at it, really the sky's the limit when you talk about all the different options with podcasting and everything now.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's the whole concept of self-publishing, right? That a guy like me or a guy like you can sit in our garage or our living room, or in our case, we started our podcast on OJ McDuffie's pool table in his game room, and create content and build an audience and build a following. And some folks just are doing it to do it, and some folks have really turned it into something. Heck, our partner in the podcast network, Travis Wingfield, started as quote unquote just a fan, did spectacular work and worked his way up through the process, and now he's drive time. I mean, he's doing a daily show for the Dolphins and is as good as it gets in that space. So yeah, the podcasting has changed so much of it, but I think for us, it's just having young people understand that if they're passionate about sports, whether they're a talented athlete or whether they can barely take 2 steps without tripping, if they're passionate about sports, that there are opportunities to build long-standing careers within the industry, and they should be aware of that. And because it is competitive, much like it's competitive out on the field of play, they should start to learn these skills and build networks now.
Yeah, and that's kind of I started kind of building it and just kind of doing it for fun. And my he's going to be 13 soon. My 13-year-old son, he's podcasted with me as well. We've done some USFL shows and trying to really kind of get him into that. And because it is about he's passionate about it. Number one,
that's great.
passionate about football, but passionate
Yeah.
about talking and all that. And I think, developing those skills, it's something you're passionate early, is helpful, whether it's football or anything. It's exactly kind of what you said.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, my boy's 12 as well, and he could care less about doing anything that has to do with football, although he's supportive of dad. But,
Mhm.
if we did something that was more about coding or building in Minecraft or whatever, he'd probably, have a very good podcast.
Oh yeah. Well, my son's into Roblox, so similar as well. So,
Very
w-
cool.
well, so you were in the media relations department. Talk about what was your? I was kind of thinking about the NFL draft and everything that kind of goes on along with that. What was your role in that when the NFL draft would come along every year?
Sure. Well, just in media relations in general, you're credentialing the media and providing access to the organization, access that allows the organization to still run the way it needs to run, and but you are that liaison. And so, on from the standpoint of the draft, you are preparing how that media is going to have access to who's making those selections, whether it's your head coach, your general manager, head of football, whatever that looks like in a particular organization. You are prepared to, every time a player is selected, you're helping announce that pick. You're providing all the biographical information. For now the draft, everybody's familiar with it who follows the NFL. That you're going to when you see that immediately after a player selected, all of a sudden they're sitting on a screen like this, and they've got media asking them questions, and they're all excited. That media relations or communications department is facilitating all of that. They're getting the statements from the coach and from the general manager. They're making them available at the end of the day. All of that information that is being received specific to your team, right? The NFL does an incredible job. We know the draft is almost like the Super Bowl. The NFL does an incredible job of getting information out there, but specific to the team that you're passionate about, it is the communications department's responsibilities to help provide that access and that information to the media so that the fans can get it.
Yeah, and you talked about then also you coming in under Jimmy Johnson, and what were some of the changes maybe in that media relations as the coaches changed and maybe as some of the players changed as well?
Yeah, I mean, so my relationship with the team when Coach Shula was there was strictly as a fan, and so
Mhm.
I only got to see what things looked like on the from the outside looking in. You would hear once you got there and you were a member of the organization, you would hear, oh, well, with Coach Shula, we did it this way. With Coach Johnson, we do it that way. But our department didn't change. Harvey was there with Coach Shula, and then was there with Coach Johnson and many coaches after that. And so I think he ran his department similarly. But every coach does things their own way. Jimmy had come from television, and we see now he's made a longstanding career in television after he gave up coaching. So he was pretty savvy. He enjoyed he enjoyed his relationships with the media. He enjoyed kind of that communication and also leveraging the media as a tool to get his to get his point across, whether he was speaking to players through the media or he just had a narrative that he wanted out there. And so he really, I think, enjoyed that and got it. But he also was tough and had high expectations of everybody, including the media. So, I can't tell you what it was like with Coach Shula just because I wasn't there. But I think departmentally, it was probably pretty similar.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it. There's so many things kind of behind the scenes that us fans don't see. The way coaches, I'm sure, and even players now are more savvy about using media and scrubbing their Instagram
Yeah.
accounts, and it's just there's a lot that goes into it. All that behind the scene. When you look at kind of your role in the team. And then with some of the players, were you able to kind of while you were there have a friendship with the players, or did you kind of have to separate the friendship in the job?
That's a great question. And the first part of your question, when you talk about the social media element, I didn't have to deal with that. Fortunately, I'm old enough
Hmm.
where social media really wasn't a thing when I was working with the organization, and I can't imagine what they have to deal with. And it's twofold, right? You have to deal with what are your players saying out there, and so you kind of love this one voice concept, or everything is controlled. Not that players are being told what to say because they aren't, but there are mantras, there are mission statements almost that the coach is setting forth and players are supposed to understand and follow. And that's team messaging. And then players are allowed to show their individuality. But once they start to have one of these, and then they have their own broadcast network, so to speak, right from their phone. And so that's something that, we've seen, not necessarily with the Dolphins that much, but we've seen things come to play. Well, actually now, right, guys have their own podcasts, all these different things take place. And then the other side of that, though, is the 24-hour news cycle. There's nonstop. The way that if you talk to a beat writer, and in those days when I was there, the beat writer would cover everything they could. They would do their research. They try to get their stories, and then they wanted to be the one with the best story coming out at 6 a.m. when the newspaper hit when Paperboy threw the newspaper and it landed on your front doorstep. And the internet, they started to post things. But even in the early stages of my career in media relations, the internet, I think newspapers were trying to figure out, are we cannibalizing? And in some way, I think they saw it coming, because if we're giving this stuff away for free, why would anybody, and so they wouldn't put everything on their website. But then they started, if this newspaper wasn't putting everything on the website, and then this newspaper was, everybody was just going over here. And so then to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, everything that was published in the paper was also published on the site. And I think, then all of a sudden newspapers became a dying business. So you fast forward that to Twitter, and how many of us sit there and you're listening or following your favorite beat writer live tweet a game, live tweet a practice? PR departments have to set forth rules in camp about what you can and can't tweet about, or you can continue to tweet, but you no longer can put out pictures because you don't want formations and things that, could all of a sudden be used as competitive disadvantage. So all of that stuff that fortunately I didn't have to deal with. As far as developing friendships, I was the number 3 guy in the department. I was the young guy. And typically what you'll see is that the younger guys, I was the age of the players that were coming in, and so if I started at 23 years old, the guys we were drafting were 23 years old. And so we might have had different backgrounds and experiences in our life, but generationally we were kind of growing up around the same music, the same television shows, maybe some of the some of the vernacular that was being used. And so, yeah, I did build some wonderful friendships, and clearly one of them led to the job that I've had for the last 18 years. And fortunately, one of the other ones led to the podcast that we started with OJ, and a lot of these other friendships have led to some great guests.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting how like connections, and you talked about the news like cycle and breaking news, and actually I started this kind of about just over a year ago, kind of almost poking fun at outdated breaking news.
Right,
being the first, I wanted to be act like I wanted to be the last, maybe a year later or something like that, and act like it's breaking news, and through that you kind of find connections, and it's cool to kind of learn more about football and just some of the ins and outs. And when I've talked to some of the beat writers and one in particular from the Bears, and it's such an interesting time. He said that Sam Mustipher had a bad game, and he ended up blocking everybody that was on Twitter, all of the, and it's such an interesting kind of dynamic now. So
yeah,
let me go ahead and we'll welcome OJ here too.
Yeah. Let's bring in the real talent. There he is.
Hey,
there's my guy.
Hey, my apologies, gentlemen. My apologies, man. Sometimes life gets in the way around here.
Hey, I've been your opening act for quite some time, Juice. It's not a problem.
And you handle it well. I know you handle it well.
I try.
Well, welcome, OJ. I'm NFL Outdated. I appreciate you joining the show as well. And we were just talking about the friendships between obviously the media relations and players. On your end of it, was that kind of hard? Did you kind of with some of the front office people, did you kind of have to have your guard up at times, or was it just kind of a different time that it is now?
Well, I tell you what, you always have to have your guard up. If you're not, you're not doing, you're not being responsible for your own well-being. But for me, I was lucky to have guys like Seth, and Harvey Green and all those guys that were kind of my liaison and always gave us a heads up about certain things or hot button topics that might be headed our way, and just be prepared for it, or give us an opportunity if we didn't want to talk to certain media outlets or whatnot to not do so. But it was always important for me and for most guys to step up to the table, step up to the microphone, just be prepared for anything. But most of the time, Seth and those guys had us ready to go. So, and coming out of Penn State, Joe wouldn't even let freshmen talk to the media, wouldn't even let them deal with them until they knew how to handle it. We had a speech comm class our first semester. Everybody had, the true freshman had a speech comm class. So he didn't get in front of the microphone and look stupid or sound stupid. I hate to use that word. My mom hates that word, but that was pretty much the reason for doing that. And, and not embarrassing yourself or embarrassing, the university and so on and so forth. So ever since then, you find guys like Seth that, that you ride with and you're in good hands.
Yeah. And were there, Seth, then, you kind of learned some of those media outlets where you maybe had to be a little bit more cautious with then?
Yeah. You kind of got to know, once you know where someone's, what direction or what place someone's coming from, then it's a lot easier, right? When someone's a wolf in sheep's clothing and you let your guard down, that's when you get into trouble. I remember Harvey used to say, a writer's a writer, or there's that Scorpion and the Frog story, right? And the scorpion ends up stinging the frog, and that's what he does. And so a writer's a writer. And I'm not saying that they're bad people. I've got some amazing friends who are writers, but ultimately they're internally, they have a desire to tell great stories and, a lot of them to break news. And so I think that if you are smart and careful and guarded to some extent, then, at least you can be safe and understand, off the record is probably going to get you in trouble every time. I would never put anything in writing or never say anything to anybody that you would be uncomfortable with coming back to haunt you later. And honestly, that's right. You said your son's almost 13. That's kind of the same thing. Don't say anything about someone who's not in the room that you wouldn't say to that person's face. Right. And I think if you kind of go by those general rules, you stay out of trouble. I know a lot of times as consumers of content or as media members, we want guys to be so, don't give me that dry answer or whatever, but then we're so quick to jump on them if we don't like what the answer is. And so, OJ was easy to work with because now OJ was passionate and OJ would get emotional and he'd get fired up, but he was also so good about understanding there's certain things that I'm willing to share with folks. And there's certain things that stay in-house. There's certain things that are family business, so to speak. And I'm just a big believer that, being truthful is important, but you don't have to share everything that's going on. And that's, we all, I use this analogy all the time, and I know we've kind of gotten way off the beaten path here, but if you and your wife are driving to a party with a bunch of other couples, and you get into this big argument over who forgot to tell their son to study for the test or whatever it is, and it's bad. It's just an ugly argument that you're having. And then you show up to the party and everybody's like, hey, how are you? Oh, everything's great. My kid, the kids are good. Everybody's healthy. That's not untrue. The kids are healthy. They're doing great in school. Everything's good at the job. They just don't need to know that the two of you were cussing each other out on the, and hopefully you guys don't have that relationship in your household, but they don't need to know that was happening on the way up. That's family business. That's in-house. That's between you and your wife. And I think the same thing applies here. They don't, what we saw happen in Golden State recently, right? Look, that's a shame that happened. But I think the bigger shame is that the world got exposed to that. The team didn't get a chance. I'm not talking about covering it up, but that's family business. That's the husband and the wife arguing over the kid not doing their homework on their way to the party. They should be able to handle that internally.
Yeah, that's the difference right now, too, if I can interject real quick. Back then, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, there were no camera phones in the locker room for things like that. And also what you want to do at times is develop a personal relationship a lot of time with some of those guys. And, they'll take care of you if you do. But if you don't, if you got a bad relationship with guys, they're happy to kill you, in terms of, their coverage of you, especially nowadays with Twitter when it's out there in 2 seconds, so something goes bad and it's hard to reel it back in. Once it's out there now.
Can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right, Juice?
Put the toothpaste back in the tube. That's right.
Well, yeah. And so kind of along this lines then, OJ, all of us have had bad days at work, and we don't have microphones, in front of our, face, oh, something went south. Tell us how it went. How was that, just kind of maybe being able to gather yourself in the locker room, maybe after a big loss or something like that? How was that to to really to be able to speak to the media after a disappointment like that on the field?
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough, but you have to step up to the mic, win, lose, or draw. If I catch the winning touchdown, I better step up to the microphone. I want to step up to the microphone. If I drop the winning touchdown, it's tougher to step up to the microphone. But you have to do both. You can't have it just one way. So I like the fact that it's a great opportunity for guys to show how professional they are, and hopefully they do. A lot of guys, don't want to do that interview after a bad loss, man. But you have to step up there and say the right things for the most part, even though you want to say other things. You just got to get your composure. Seth, what is it, the cool down period that we had in the locker room or whatever it was to, get our senses about us? And
that cool down period is invaluable.
Yeah.
It's invaluable. And oftentimes not long enough, we know, for some guys, because, I don't know how you can run for, we say 60 minutes, but for 3 hours and play a game that is that physical, that is that competitive, that demanding, and have something happen that didn't go your way and have to in 10 minutes be ready to be polished and not embarrass yourself or your organization, when cameras are stuck in your face. It's something that I'm quite honestly amazed that guys handle it as well as they do. But when guys don't handle it well, I think sometimes there's a little bit more grace that needs to be given.
So was there a specific amount of time that was allotted to that cool down period that was scheduled?
Yeah, I believe it's 10 minutes. I believe it's 10 minutes from the time that the game ends until the locker room has to be open.
Right. And that's not a lot of time.
Not at all.
After you're talking about 3 hours or 60 minutes, that's talking about, it's not a lot of time.
And depending on who your coach is and how the game went, 3 minutes might be you getting your ass chewed. I'm sorry if I'm saying things I shouldn't say, but good. 3 minutes might be getting chewed out by your coach. So not only did you just get your head bashed in or disappointed or see that your playoff hopes are falling or dwindling, but then your coach, your boss chews you out. And so now you've got about 7 minutes to kind of digest and process all that and put on a good face. And so I think some guys who get, JT was the last guy always, and it drove media nuts, but he needed it. He would, he was so charged up, and especially in his latter years when he was playing incredible football, but unfortunately the team wasn't, having the success that equaled his level of play. It was a difficult thing for him, and he needed to compose himself so that he knew everybody needed to talk to him, and he would answer every question that he had to answer, but he didn't want to be there because he also, much like OJ, uber competitive, passionate, emotional. And if he just said the first thing off the top of his head, we probably would look at him differently.
Sure.
Well, kind of along that lines, I am a Bears fan, and the story with Walter Payton after the Super Bowl not getting the touchdown and him kind of being off in the corner. It would be interesting to see if that happened now. But thinking about him and how passionate and how just great he was at his craft, and to finally get to the big stage and not get that. I mean, that had to be amazingly disappointing for him. But then he gathered himself. Were you able to kind of get to know Walter at all, OJ?
I met Walter. It's so funny you say that. I met Walter Payton one time at right after I finished at Penn State. We were at a banquet in D.C. and we were sitting on the dais next to each other, man. And he was just the nicest guy ever. I mean, sweetness is right, man. He was a bull on the field, but man, off the field, he was super, super kind, super nice. As a matter of fact, I got a little story. After I met him, we exchanged phone numbers, right? Back there was no cell phone, so it's really just, house phone or whatever, my apartment phone.
You didn't have the rotary dial one, Juice.
No, I actually had a punch. You could punch.
You could at least have a push button. Okay.
Yeah, push button for sure. And so I go back to Penn State after that. I was finishing up before the draft, and about a week later, there's a phone call comes to my apartment, and my roommate Will Kelty answers the phone call. And he said, "Who's this?" It says, "OJ there." He said, "Who's this? Who's calling?" And the guy said, "Walter Payton." My roommate said, "Yeah, whatever," and hung up on him. You know what I mean? So, and then he called back, and I talked to him. But yeah, it was funny, man. I mean, it was like, who the hell? Walter Payton's calling here? No way, get out of here, man. You know what I mean? So that was my relationship with Walter, man. Just
love
a great
that,
man.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you talked about Penn State a little bit, and what did you learn from Joe Paterno? Maybe some of the good things that you kind of maybe took into your professional career and into your life going forward.
Yeah, there are a lot of really good things. We talked about the speech communications part of it, but more importantly, man, he was all about time, not wasting anybody's time. 5 minutes early is late. You got to be there 10 minutes early because you're wasting everybody's time. If you're a minute late, you're not a minute late. You're a minute times 120 people late. So that's 120 minutes, So every day, every single day during the week, we all had to get up and be at breakfast by 8 o'clock in the morning, because this is what we're going to do in your real life. You're not going to be able to sleep in, whether you had class or not. A lot of guys would be there by 8 o'clock and go back to their apartment or dorm and go to bed, But he wanted everybody up, running through breakfast, getting their day started early. If you miss class, he'd have somebody follow you for 2 weeks to make sure you're going to class and everything. It was just a lot of really important things about life that he did, more than just the football field. You ask him who his best team was. I was make up a year now, but I can't remember exactly the year. It'd be like 1976. And he said, well, how's that your best team when they were like 7-4? He said, well, 5 are doctors, 6 are lawyers, 3 own their own business. So that's how I quantify his best team. So there were a lot of really good things we got from Joe.
And when you look at your college time in Joe, and I wanted to touch on a little bit your thoughts on NIL and maybe how that would have affected you in college, playing.
Yeah, I talk. If my mom was around, I'll tell her she had me way too early. I mean, it's now NIL deals, but the NFL deals too, right? All those NIL deals, right? I think guys needed to get paid for what they were doing in the name and likeness for a long time. I think it's kind of out of control already. They got to reel it in a little bit, but I think these guys should be getting something. If you go into, and Seth can say this, if you go into back in the day, if you go into a Gator, Florida Gator pro shop, you see a number 15 jersey with no name on the back. We know exactly who that is, right? So why is he not getting, the money for it? It makes no sense that the university is stacking up all these bills, and then everybody wants to say, well, you got a scholarship. You got your room and board paid for. Man, I was broke as hell in college. Yeah, I had a scholarship and I was eating well, but that was all I could. I'd walk by and see my friends with money in restaurants as I walk by the window, just walking the streets. So, yeah, I'm all for the NIL deals. They got to tame it a little bit. But, yeah, these guys deserve to get paid for what they bring to the university. The millions and millions of dollars especially these football players bring to universities, yeah, they need to get a cut of that for sure.
Although it would be interesting, Seth, as a media relations in within an organization, you get some of these rookies that maybe come to the NFL and maybe they're making less,
I am convinced that we're going to start to see a generation of guys. Because look, this is not an easy game to play. Juice says that all the time. Everyone says, "Oh, I would play for free," and he's like, "Yeah, right." I would be interested. Some of these guys who are coming in with 9, 10, $12 million deals, 7 figures, 8-figure deals. If you made $10 million in college and you feel like, you know what, and maybe you're not going to be a top 10 pick, but maybe you're going to, because again, it's how much speculating is it? So you get kids that come in and the odds of them living up to that are probably not very high for a lot of them. And so let's say you're going to be a 3rd or 4th round pick and maybe you'll make a team, maybe you won't. Maybe you just decide you're going to pick something else to do in life and not going to take any more hits and not going to have to go through boot camp, essentially, which is training camp, year in and year out. So I think that the motivation is going to be different. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
The motivation is what I was thinking about too, Big Seth.
Yeah, that drive to get, the way it's structured now, even if you're a top pick and you make great money, but the real drive is to get to that second contract. And I don't know if you're coming out of college and you got $10 million sitting in the bank and you've had good support by your university and or whoever's been around you. Maybe you decide I'm going to start a business and I'm going to be able to walk when I'm 65 and not have to have a knee replacement and not, and you start to look at the math of, and I hate to talk about this around one of my best friends, but Juice, the life expectancy for you is different than the average human because of the sacrifice on that field. And I know OJ would never trade it for anything, but at the same time, if he had made 10, 12, $15 million in college, maybe he would have, maybe he would have done it differently. I don't know.
On top of that, Big Seth, we both know this. Not everybody loves football.
Right.
Not everybody that plays the game loves the game. They play the game for that money, but if they've already got it, then
right. The opportunity, right? They're playing it for different things, that's exactly right. So I think it'll be really interesting to see. And we used to laugh. We had a couple guys. I remember drafted a guy. I won't put his name out there, but we drafted him for Baylor. And he was a lower round pick, not the guy you're thinking of,
Okay,
Juice.
all right.
But he came in, and in training camp, they're getting, what is it? You were getting $600 checks, or something. At which compared to what NFL money is, he's like, what is this? I made more in college. He wasn't supposed to be making anything in college. So I don't know what those $100 handshakes were like at Baylor at that time. And I'm not trying to put that school on blast, but my point is that's how he felt then. Imagine when you're allowed to do it. Imagine when it's above the rules and you're allowed to do it. And a guy may get recruited and have a $7, $8, $9, $10 million deal. And then if he actually starts to play well, we're seeing this kid at Alabama. Think about the Heisman House commercials. And I know we got to go, Juice, but the Heisman House commercials, this is the first year I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This kid's playing in the game and he's in the Heisman House commercials with all of these legends. He's getting paid to do that. You've got players now that are buying suits for all of their teammates. You've got players that it's a different animal. And I think there's a lot of real positives that guys are finally getting an opportunity. But I also think that it's a slippery slope and it could get scary. And I'm glad that we deal with professionals.
In the one story, I talked with the Michigan podcast yesterday about Blake Corum, and just the positive, what he's doing, he was actually using it, buying food in his community. So that's a positive.
And there's nothing wrong with making money,
No.
right? I mean, this is America, and make
not.
as much money as you can. And the kids didn't create the system, right? The kid, and to Juice's point, it probably could have been addressed and should have been addressed sooner, and they could have put more structure to it. But they turned it into the wild, wild west, and now they're going to have to live with it. But I don't fault the kids at all. But you might start to get some people acting in a way that you're not happy about. So I don't know. But and Andy, we've got so we're actually running. We're going to interview a former long snapper of the Dolphins, a guy by the name of Ed Perry, who was a teammate of OJ's, and also his barber.
Right.
And so we're excited to have some fun stories.
Look at that.
We definitely are on. Yeah, both of us, right?
I'm getting there too. So, I definitely appreciate you guys coming on. Definitely want to connect and support the JT Foundation. Where can everyone find you guys again?
Yeah, so the Jason Taylor Foundation, they can go to jasontaylorfoundation.org, or they can follow us at JT Foundation 99. But I learned everything I know from the foundation business from working at the Catch 81 Foundation. My man OJ, he got me started before I ever realized I'd be working in that industry. So that's a really cool thing. We get to work together. We're actually hosting a Halloween event, helping out the Broward Health Foundation here in a couple of weeks, my favorite event of the year. So the Signature Grand Ghoul. So we don't just love football, but we love giving back to the community.
No doubt about it.
Thanks again, guys. Once again, this has been NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the Miami Dolphins. Thanks again, guys from the Fish Tank Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.